Well, welcome to the Narrative Method. Abigail Disney, how are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm very good. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, yes, you are good. I want to just take a moment to read a little bit about you. Abby is a philanthropist, social activist, advocating for peace building, gender justice, and systemic cultural change. She's also an Emmy Award winning documentary filmmaker for The Armor of Light. Her latest film, The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales, which is amazing, which she co-directed with Kathleen Hughes, made its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival and is available on demand now. In season 4 of the podcast All Ears, Abigail used the film as a jumping off point to ask big thinking business leaders, union organizers, economists, and others how they would fix our broken economy. She's also chair and co-founder of Level Forward, an ecosystem of storytellers, entrepreneurs, and social changemakers dedicated to balancing artistic vision, social impact, and stakeholder return. She created the nonprofit Pieces Loud, which uses storytelling to advance social movements, and the Daphne Foundation, which supports organizations working for a more equitable, fair, and peaceful New York City. So in your spare time, what about who you are today would have blown the mind of the girl you were?
Well, thank you for that beautiful and kind introduction, Shari. And I'm so glad to be here. That's a really hard question to answer because I don't know why, but as a little girl, I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about myself as an adult other than to want to be Willie Mays. And that's a little bit of part of my story, honestly, because I was a great big tomboy and I really loved sports and I was really good at it. And at a certain point, around 12 years old or so, I remember looking around myself and saying to myself, oh, so my brothers keep getting to fantasize, but I'm not allowed. None of those things are available to me, being an astronaut, being the president, being Willie Mays, or whatever else. So that was an interesting moment for me. Carol Gilligan has written about this. I experienced that, crash that a lot of girls do at that age. So it depends on whether you're asking me about before or after the crash. But I mainly, I wanted to be a lot of things. I wanted to be everything. And so I think maybe little Abby would be surprised by how many things I'm doing. That Abby never went away. I'm just interested in everything and everyone all the time. And then the Abby after the crash would be surprised by how strong I am and delighted to know that I have that in me.
Let me be the first to call you Willie Mays. You are. So earlier we were talking about moral injury. And tell us about your interest in that.
Well, just to give you a brief sense of what that describes. I mean, it's kind of obvious from the name of it, but it's an actual concept that is making its way through the psychological and psychiatric communities. It rose out of the study of trauma, especially PTSD with Vietnam veterans is really where it's first started to get discussed in a serious way. And there's a real distinction between trauma and moral injury because trauma is really, it's like a maladaptation of your brain to, changing circumstances, and you're no longer not safe, but your brain is still reacting as though you are. And so that is one kind of problem that comes home with a soldier. But the other kind of problem is with what you did, whether you were ordered to or not, or what you saw done, or what you didn't prevent from happening, what you were forced to do that was so outside of your moral consciousness that you feel what comes with it is it's first of all not a maladaptation. It's your brain doing what it's supposed to do. It was designed for that. But it comes with a lot of depression and a lot of the same kinds of problems and difficulties that come with PTSD. So the overlap is tremendous. But it's also behind, most people think, the rising suicide rates among veterans. Just in the last year since we started this war on terror, we've lost just slightly short of 8,000 soldiers to combat, but we've lost over 30,000 soldiers to suicide. So that you're really, when you sign up, almost 4 times as likely to die by your own hand as by an enemy combatant. And that should really make us all just really stop. But, you know, moral injury also manifests in people who do other kinds of things, like people who do executions, police officers, people who work in slaughterhouses, people who have to work in the medical system without enough resources to actually treat the people they want to treat. So little by little, it's kind of advancing outward from this very obvious place where it was first described to outward into society. I'm really interested in the fact that my mother's side of the family came from Louisiana. I believe deeply that there was terrible moral injury that came with the chattel slavery system and with everything that followed on after that, because it's not like white people in the South stopped oppressing Black people just because slavery was illegal. We know that abundantly well. And I believe that moral injury passes through generations the way trauma does. And I also believe that that it's collective.
So,
Yeah.
so how have you worked through your own moral injury?
Well, I mean, what I've been trying to do lately is to describe the way in which I became aware of it operating in me as an adult human being in the world, in society. Because when you're growing up, you don't really know the difference between the way you're being raised and the way everybody else is being raised. And you certainly don't know when to say, well, no, that sounds immoral to me. You develop into a consciousness. But as an example, I remember reading my 5th grade history textbook and my mother standing over me and shaking her head at what I was reading, and then eventually saying, when I asked her what was wrong, well, you know, the Yankees just don't tell you the truth in these textbooks.
Mm,
You know, most of the owners were very
wow.
kind to their slaves. That's just the truth of it. And, you know, they always make it sound so much worse than it was. And so that's just a tiny little example of the way, you know, in an actual mechanical sense, moral injury is passed. I mean, she was asking me to participate in an ideological system
Sure.
that violated my very basic sense of morality. But also there was a need she had that she was expressing in that, which was, I need you to love me. I need you to love my grandmother, and I need you to love everybody who came before us. And I know they did these things, but I want you to love them. And it feels like there's a choice we have between either loving them or knowing these things. So it just seems important to me to really face the truth and to hold both things in your head at the same time. So that's why I'm interested in it and want to
Yeah. And I mean,
go where it takes me.
in the example you share for your mother, if you won't forgive that, then she's got to hold it and deal with it. So it's a dumping thing. But so given your famous family and all of the projections you must have received and continue to receive your entire life, and we all do in various ways, and particularly because you disagree so much with their morality.
Mhm.
What has it been like for you to move out of that and really just declare who you are?
Um, I think that most people with a famous ancestor feel obligated to that ancestor because everyone around you is talking about them. And very often you feel the way people are drawn to you. And partly for the wrong reasons, because people just want to be near fame or famous people. But partly because they're fascinated by this thing you have in your life that they can't quite touch or have as their own. So yeah, projection is the very fundamental way in which I have to greet the world most days, is I have to understand that almost every interaction I have is colored by whatever somebody else is bringing into it. But I really believe that truth is the most important way to greet the world. And so when I do criticize Walt or my family or the business or whatever, I'm doing it in the spirit of like, we just have to be telling ourselves and each other the truth about things. I have in the past said things publicly about Walt's racism, which I sometimes am amazed that I have to tell people why I think that's true. It's kind of obvious to me, but I have been greeted with such public blowback of the most vicious kind. Of all the things I've said publicly, that is the thing that makes people angriest.
Mm.
And again, to go back to moral injury, that's very telling about where we are as a society, because like you can go ahead and love the movies and still know he was a racist.
Mm.
But you could also expand your awareness of things to the idea that you can go ahead and forgive, or at least hold that in your head, and know it. Your present day reality doesn't really change. But most people feel like if they love Walt and I say Walt is a racist, I'm calling them a racist. They
Mhm.
take it as the charge against themselves. And so if we don't develop this opportunity to contain two ideas in our head at the same time, I think that we'll always be stuck in this impasse that we're in currently right now, where you have one set of people saying, don't talk about it, don't talk about it, I don't want to hear it. And another set of people saying like, I really need you to greet the pain I'm feeling. I really wish you would allow me to tell you how this has affected me.
It's fascinating because in a way you're talking about the loneliness of people trying to keep up a front, the loneliness of the super rich.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
talk to,
yes.
you
I mean,
think
I've
that,
encountered that. I think it's an extraordinary side effect of a lot of wealth,
mhm,
um, that the people who are living with it have sort of cordoned themselves off from the world. And in my mother's case, my mother came from a sort of standard, solid middle class family, and married my father, who by that time had, a globally famous name and was coming into a lot of resources. So she had a big kind of change in her life and in her fortunes. And she lived with a significant amount of fear and paranoia about what people wanted from her and why they wanted to talk to her, and people taking things from her and so forth. So she raised us to not feel comfortable
mm,
around people we didn't already know.
mm,
And she raised us to sort of need to be around people like ourselves in order to feel safe enough to share things
sure.
about ourselves. And that is a really common way to raise children in really resourced families. And I think that most kids, out of loyalty, out of love for the family of origin that they come from, which we all love our family origin, and when they're awful, you kind of still love them. And anything like stepping off or disagreeing or joining another political party or any of those kinds of things ends up feeling like betrayal.
Yeah.
And I think it leads to this very lonely, isolated way. Some of the best things I've ever done have been as a result of pretending as though it's really all right to move among regular people. And the lesson I learned from doing that was, oh, I'm just a person, just a regular one. I'm not any kind of special variety of person. I don't have superpowers. I don't matter more than anyone else. I matter exactly the same. That's actually good news. That is
Of
the news
course.
that wealthy people try to avoid learning. And it's actually an invitation into life. And I wish I could do this for every wealthy person I know, is get them past that fear and let them in on the good news. Like, you're invited to be on the same team everybody else is on.
Well, I'll be involved in that project with you if you want. I
Yeah.
think it's so important. I think it could really change the politics and the society that we are sort of dealing with.
Yeah.
But this is a good place to stop, not because I'm finished or probably you, but I think it's time to get on with the writing. And I'm so glad you'll be here afterwards so folks can talk to you some more. I'm going to stop recording now.